Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 919B, and today's date is March 15th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Putin Pushes Peace in Syria while the U.S. calls on the coalition to bring in troops. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, the FBI is doing something very interesting. They're making no headway with Apple at this point, and they're threatening to raise the stakes in the legal battle with Apple. And they're saying at this point, they demand access to iPhone's source code and the electronic signature used to verify its software updates. The FBI right now wants it all. Basically, with the digital key, the FBI would be able to fool technology globally that it was Apple. Think about that for a second. They'll be able to tell the phones that, oh no, I'm Apple, don't worry, I'm just modifying something. The key is a very powerful tool, and it's used to ensure security, or it can be used to defeat it. And this is why Apple doesn't want to hand this over, because if this key gets out, guess what? Other criminals could use this to access phones. Now, the FBI will have the ability to turn on your microphone, to turn on your camera, to do whatever they want. And this is a scary idea. So they want the technical tools and the code to control your devices and bypass any security and encryption that the company might employ. So basically, the Fourth Amendment, they just want to throw it out the window. That's what they want at this point. And we see the FBI, they are becoming like the Gestapo. So the FBI right now, they're looking for domestic terrorists. They're looking for extremists. They're having students and teachers spy on each other. And you might be a domestic terrorist under the eyes of the FBI if you are for the Second Amendment, if you read survivalist literature, show signs of self-sufficiency, fear an economic collapse by gold and barter items, subscribe to religious views concerning the Book of Revelation, voice fears about Big Brother or big government, go on about constitutional right and civil liberties, believe in a New World Order conspiracy. And we see at this point, the FBI is turning into a police force like we had in World War II. Now, we see a lot of countries heading in the same direction. France, Spain, Turkey, all moving in the same direction. And most of the private Western Central Bank countries will be headed in this area. But the FBI's laundry list of crimes against the American people includes surveillance, disinformation, blackmail, entrapment, intimidation tactics, harassment, indoctrination, governmental overreach, abuse, misconduct, trespassing, enabling criminal activity, and damaging private property. And these are the things that we just know about. Think about it. The FBI has become a master in the art of entrapment. FBI agents are among the nation's most notorious lawbreakers. The FBI's powers expanded after 9/11. And now they have carte blanche to access America's most personal information. The FBI's spying capabilities are on par with the NSA. The FBI's hacking powers have gotten downright devious. The FBI's reach is more invasive than ever. So the FBI right now is a scary police force in a police state. The agency's biometric database has grown to massive proportions, the largest in the world. And it encompasses fingerprints, palm, face, iris scans, DNA, and it's continually growing. Everyone should be a little nervous about this, because this is how it starts. And when it finishes, it's not pretty. Remember, all your information now is being fed into the local law enforcement because they want everyone on the same page. because when this system rips itself apart, they're getting prepared and ready to maintain control and actually to protect themselves against those people who would like to remove power from them. And when I say them, the government, the central bank, those who are in power. And this turns out the same way every single time if you look back in history. Those people in power always go out fighting. They never say, okay, we're wrong, we give up, we didn't run everything smoothly. No. They kill as many people as they possibly can to maintain their power. They put as many people in jail as they possibly can to maintain their power. They torture as many people as they can to maintain their power. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're on our way. Now, out in Ukraine, we see Ukraine is trying to sell off a lot of their state assets. And no one wants to buy anything. So they're putting it on sale. And you can get discounts of up to 60%. So they're looking to attract foreign buyers. And Ukraine's state property fund says all the assets and have been put up for sale more than 10 times and have found no takers right now. So as a result, 22 of the 34 state assets are now being put up for sale for a 60% discount. 9 with a discount of 50%, and 3 are up to auction at a reduced asking price. Among the companies offered for sale is Black Sea Shipyard, Lviv Coal Company, a radio plant. So we see Ukraine is doing the same thing as Greece. They're selling off their assets. And the things the central banks and other investors wanted, they already purchased. And we see right now, this is what central bankers do. They put the country so far into debt, they have to sell off their assets, the real assets, because they are in debt with paper and ink, which is created out of thin air. And we see Obama is out there, and he is saying that the Russian separatists, which is the southeastern people, they need to implement the ceasefire Minsk II deal. They have to allow the Organization for Security and Cooperation into that area. We need peacekeepers in that area. And they need access to the borders. Well, a lot of this is not in the Minsk II ceasefire. Actually, the United States wasn't even part of the Minsk II ceasefire. France was there, Germany was there, Russia was there, Ukraine was there. Strange that the U.S. would step in and tell the southeastern people they have to abide by the Minsk II ceasefire. If you look at the Minsk II ceasefire, the southeastern people have done their share. They're waiting on Kiev, which is supposed to authorize elections in their area. They were supposed to set a date by the end of 2015, which they never did. So Putin came out and said, well, Kiev needs to stick to the implementation of the Minsk Accords. And he lays out what they haven't done. And of course, as we can see right now, the whole idea behind this is to start an offensive. This is why Kiev is not fulfilling their end. This is why Obama is still making the calls out there saying, you must abide, because they're getting prepared and ready. They've been training the armed forces. They've been bringing military assets into the location. And we can see Ukraine is a hot spot. Syria is a hot spot. North Korea is a hot spot. Out in the Pacific, the Spratly Islands with China, that's a hot spot. And the U.S. is rotating between all these, trying to provoke one of these countries to do something. Now, France, they're going to increase their military reserves by 12,000. Currently, they're about 28,000 strong, and they're going to bring it up to 40, almost a 50% increase. And we're going to see a lot of countries start to do this because we can see the provocation for war is going to continue until they can get war started any way they possibly can. Now, out in Libya, the EU has started work on sanctions against the Libyan figures, the elected government that's in Tripoli, because if they hold up the agreement on the new unity government, they will be sanctioned. Remember, the unity government says, we are now the new government, we don't care what you say. And they don't care what the people say. The people want the government they have right now that's located in Tripoli. Under the Libyan constitution, the government that is in Tripoli is in charge of the country. And we see the U.S. central bank moved the central bank out of Tripoli over to the east. They moved all the ports for supplying oil away from Tripoli. They did whatever they possibly could do to get people to use their system and to buy the oil using the dollar. And all of this is not working. So now they're forcing the unity government on the people. And they've done this before. When they invaded Libya, when they invaded Lebanon, when they invaded Yemen, when they invaded Iraq, and they're invading Syria right now. They did this in Ukraine. And we're going to have to watch this situation very carefully because they want the unity government in there. They want to bring in the coalition forces to get rid of those pesky people who think they have rights. But of course, Russia is saying, listen, there is no invasion of Libya unless we go to the UN and we map out some type of resolution of what is really going to be done there. And of course, the U.S. coalition forces most likely don't want to do this. Because if they did, they would have done this already. They just want to go in there and put back the puppet government, sell the oil using the dollar, and call it a day. Now, out in Turkey, we understand there was a explosion. And of course, Erdogan is out there blaming this on the PKK, the Kurds, saying, yes, it was them. This is why we need to go bomb them in Syria. This is why we need to bomb them in Iraq. And we can see at this point it was a false flag. But very interestingly, the U.S. Embassy in Turkey said it learned from the Turkish authorities about a terrorist threat in this area. And they were told to warn the U.S. citizens. So they already knew this was going to happen. Now, was this intel, or they didn't want to get the U.S. citizenry involved in what was going down? Because we could tell this was completely a false flag event because they blocked out all social media, all journalists, the transfer of photos or video, because they didn't want people to see certain things. So they've already identified the person who did this, and they're saying it's a female suicide car bomber who did this, and she's part of the Kurdish rebels, and she is from Syria. And we can see this is their plan, because their plan is to start a war in Syria. They're doing whatever they possibly can to show that they're being attacked. Now, we understand out in Syria, the peace negotiations are going on right now. We realize, because it's all over the corporate media, that Putin has removed some of his military. Now, has he removed all of it? No, he has not. He decided to move out some of the military, some of the ground forces, and they're saying that some of the aircraft are going to say they're going to continue bombing, and they're going to continually bomb the Islamic State. But they're saying the base in Latakia is secure now. The Syrian troops can handle it. And there's no reason to have the troops in this area because Syria has the upper hand. And he's saying that we did this in about 5 to 6 months. Now, the U.S. was in there for 18 plus months. And the Islamic State expanded their territory. So we see a difference here. And with the coalition, not just the U.S., the U.K., Israel making their runs every so often, they didn't do anything because they really weren't going after the Islamic State. What's very interesting, though, is that the corporate media, like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, They're coming out with their headlines, and New York Times is saying that Putin is withdrawing the main part of his forces in Syria, reflecting a desire not to get bogged down in the Syrian war. Bogged down? They were only there for 6 months. Who's bogged down in there? Oh, wait. The U.S. and the coalition forces who've been there 18 plus months, who couldn't do anything because they really weren't. The Wall Street Journal claimed he achieved his goal of propping up Assad, bombing not the Islamic State. Well, he was bombing the Islamic State. The U.S. wasn't bombing the Islamic State. They're saying that he bombed the moderate rebels. Well, the moderate rebels really don't exist. They were all transferred into the Islamic State, into Al-Qaeda, into al-Nusra. So we can see at this point, the corporate media, under the guidance of the government, is trying to spin this any way they possibly can. So Putin went in, hit the Islamic State, decimated the proxy army of the United States government, central bankers, and liberated all these cities and towns. And then he took it a step further, where he's going to withdraw from Syria to show there's no reason to be there because the Islamic State has been beaten. And other countries should follow in his footsteps. So what is he removing from this area? Of the 60 fighters and bombers, more than half will be withdrawn. The S-400 missile systems, they are staying for defense. The Buk M3, the Tor M2, and the Pantsir S-1, they are staying in this area. Russia will continue to operate air sorties to fight the Islamic State. They'll keep their base in Tartus. And right now, as the Syrian army, the Tiger forces, move quickly through all these towns and villages and liberate them, there is no reason for Russia to be there. Now, Russia can bring back these troops in a split second. The ships off the coast in the Mediterranean, they are going to stay there, and they will operate, and they will rotate. So has Russia really left? No, they still have a presence in Syria. They're just saying they don't need as much of equipment, and they're showing the world they're not there to garrison a country like the U.S. in Libya, Yemen, Iraq, Ukraine, and all the other areas. In Afghanistan, where the wars just never seem to end, where they never meet any of their objectives. It just goes on and on and on. So we can see right now that during the peace talks, there really is no plan B, because Syria is not going to agree to a partition. Russia says there is no partitioning. And the only plan B, actually, is to continue with war. So right now, during the talks, the groups aren't actually going to meet. The UN officials are going to be ferrying messages back and forth to the groups. And we can see right now, Putin is putting a lot of pressure on the United States, because he's saying, okay, let's have peace. Once again, let's have peace. Well, the U.S. doesn't want peace. They want war. And we're going to have to watch this situation very carefully, because we know that the U.S., Israel, they like using false flags to stir things up. And if we go back to 2013 during that sarin gas attack, where the alternative media was out there saying the whole thing doesn't make sense, there's no way that Assad did this, this was a false flag, it was the rebels who did this. And of course, the U.S. brought in the aircraft carriers, subs, all to the Mediterranean, ready to attack Syria. And Obama actually admits that Assad didn't do the attacks. He said that the U.S. intelligence wasn't a slam dunk. It wasn't clear that Assad did this. And he's saying, and he was talking to The Atlantic, that the report didn't say Assad was definitely responsible for the chemical attacks. But funny, at the time, they were going on these reports, bringing us to war, and they weren't positive, absolutely sure that Assad was responsible. He said the U.S. intelligence community was unable to confirm that Assad was definitely responsible for the chemical attacks. He wasn't. During that time period, Putin and Assad brought in the UN Security Council to investigate a chemical attack. They put him up in a hotel. During this time period, there was the sarin gas attack. Why would they bring in the UN at that time if they were going to attack using chemical weapons? It wouldn't make any sense. Plus, MIT and many others did an experiment of the trajectory of the missile that was used, and they said it was impossible that it came from Assad's area. It came from the rebel area. Then they found the cave where the rebels were hiding out in, where all the sarin gas was. And we know that the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, the Free Syrian Army, they all use chemical weapons supplied by Turkey, by the United States. Now, right now, Saudi Arabia is doing something very interestingly. They are expanding the KC-130J, which is used to transport troops and vehicles, and they've acquired, through the U.S. government, more of these, and they're going to operate the largest C-130 fleet outside the United States. And these are advanced aerial refuelers. And we know up in Syria, the U.S. is extending a runway on one Syrian airfield to accept C-130 transport planes. And they're building another airfield up in this area. Now, Saudi Arabia says the withdrawal of the Russian military means nothing to them. It does not have any influence on the decision to send ground troops into the country. We've already said that troops, including the international coalition, will be sent into Syria in the fight against terrorism. What are they waiting for? Well, the decision on determining the date of the ground operation is dependent on the United States. So, things are already in motion. They're prepared. They're just waiting for a big bang to say, see, we need to send troops in. Now remember, Carter, Obama, they're calling out to the coalition forces that we need more military troops. We need more military assets. We are committed to getting the Islamic State. No, what they're really saying is we're committed in using the Islamic State or any other terrorist organization to go after Assad. And since the U.S. doesn't have authorization to send more troops, we need the coalition forces to help out in this situation. And this is why this has been building. This is why Saudi Arabia now has one of the largest C-130 transport plane fleets right now. And they're building the runways to accept these planes because they can fly them right into the northern part of Syria. Military assets, troops, boom, unloaded, ready to fight. This is what we're seeing at this point. We're just waiting for that false flag. We're going to have to see how everything works out, but we see everything is ready to go. Everything is in motion, and they're preparing. Because you know, these peace talks most likely will not work out, because the only agenda the United States has is for Assad to go or partition Syria. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.